everybody, today we're going to install 6 new speakers, cut 2 holes, and install 2 amplifiers, wire them up to the stock radio. Let's get started. Alright, we got the top-down view of the boat here, and this is the location of our 4 stock speakers and the battery. This is where we installed the speakers on the swim platform from a previous video. And this is the location of the 2 new speakers we're going to put in today. The new amplifiers will be mounted in the starboard transom area over here. This is the path we're going to use to run the new speaker wire. This is how we're going to run the power wires from the battery to the amplifier. And this is where we're going to run the audio wires from the amplifier to the radio. We're going to get started by drilling the hole in the port side footwell. I didn't have a jigsaw small enough to fit in the area here, and I didn't want to completely destroy my router bit, so I took the drill and made a whole bunch of little holes just to lessen up the fiberglass. Then I took the router bit on the Dremel and just cut the hole out that way. Now on the starboard side here, just trace the cutout again using the template. I did the same thing here too. I used the drill to make a whole bunch of little holes, put the router bit on the Dremel and connected all the dots. It just pushes out when you finish. Just make sure you don't breathe in the fiberglass dust. Next is to take out all the old speakers. This was pretty easy, it was just 4 screws holding them in. But what we're going to find out when we put the template on it is that the hole is too small. So in order to best cover up the old speaker's screw holes, I trimmed back the outer edge of the template, then tried to position it perfectly over the old hole. I took the pencil and traced it out where we're going to have to trim out the little bit of fiberglass. I taped it all up and started the drilling process all over again. Same thing here. We're going to drill out a whole bunch of little holes and then use the Dremel to connect them all up and trim off these little bits. And guys, please use a shop vac when you're doing this. You don't want this dust all over the boat, and you don't want to breathe in it either. It's really bad for your lungs. So we're going to run the power wire and the ground wires first. We're going to go from the amplifier location to the battery. So we're going to go from starboard to port side. I got my 6-gauge wire here with the ring connectors already soldered on. I'm going to temporarily hook it to the bus bar here so I know what length to cut the wire when I mount the breaker. This is our 60 amp breaker with the reset on it, so that this way if it were to trip I can easily reset it. Unscrew the caps from each side and loosen up the hex screws. This is the short piece of wire that's going to go to the bus bar. I'm going to put a little dielectric grease here to seal it from moisture, and I'm going to replace the cap on the end. On the side where the wires are already run, we have to put the caps over the wires first, and then put the moisture seal on. I'm going to strip the wire back about a ½ inch, twist it a little bit, and slide it into the circuit breaker. We're going to tighten down these screws. Going to add a little more dielectric grease to the ends, and then we're just going to screw the caps back in. We're going to take these wires and reconnect it back to the bus bar, washer, lock washer, nut. I have these 1-inch self-tapping screws that I'm going to use to mount the circuit breakers to the wall. The ground gets connected to the bus bar next. Washer, lock washer, nut, and then tighten. Just going to tidy up the wires a little bit over here with some zip ties. Going to the starboard side now, going to unscrew these bundle of wires and just push it to the side so we have access to the wall. I'm going to take the 2 amplifiers and temporarily mount them to the wall so that this way we can figure out where to run the wires and how long to make them. Okay, now we're going to start running the wire through the boat. I use 14-2 pre-tinned marine wire. Going to come from the port side, and we're going to run it straight across the controls here. Just snake everything right behind. There's a nice little channel, everything just goes right in between. Gently pull it through. I'm using the blue tape here and just labeling each wire so I know where they all go. I know these are reusable zip ties, but I'm just going to clip them off. It's way easier, and I'm going to push the wire through the side channel. It's very important you keep these wires labeled properly, otherwise you won't know where they're going to go to. You don't want to cut this wire too short either. You want to leave about a foot at each end. There was one speaker where I couldn't position it to cover up all the old mounting holes, so I had some old 3M 5200 and I'm just going to fill in the old mounting holes with it. By the time everything's all mounted, you're not even going to notice it. Okay, we've cut the 2 new speaker holes and we've enlarged the other 4 holes for the speakers, and I run all the wire through the boat. So now I'm just going to loom up all the wire, just clean everything up and get the ends on the speaker wires. It's time to strip the sheathing. Take your razor, cut back the insulation and trim it down. Strip back the wire about a ½ inch or so and then twist on these heat shrink female connectors. Crimp them down good and they'll be all set for the heat gun. It's a fairly easy process and I hope you have it down, because you got to do it 7 more times. Now that all the ends are on, we're going to use the heat gun to create a nice weather-tight seal. Move the gun back and forth on the low heat setting so we don't melt the wire and we don't burn the connectors either. Alright, it's almost coming together. So we're going to put the speaker in right now. I'm going to drill 2 holes and put 2 screws in to keep the speaker in place. Then I'm going to take a drill bit and just kind of mark out where the rest of the screws are. So I don't damage the speaker, I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to drill out and clean up the rest of the screw holes. Once that's done, I'm going to hand apply the gasket around the fiberglass. I'm going to put a little dielectric grease on the electrical connectors to keep it watertight. I'm going to place the speaker back in its hole and I'm going to hand tighten the mounting screws. This one's done. And we're going to go ahead and repeat this process for the other 5 speakers. These Swimdeck speakers just need the dielectric grease and to be connected. Okay, so this is where we're going to have to get fancy with our wiring because of what we're working with. The stock radio only has RCA outputs for the front and rear. So what I'm going to do is have one amplifier control the front speakers and one amplifier control the rear speakers. The front speakers are going to be the 2 speakers up by the bow and the 2 new speakers we installed at the helm and opposite that on the port side. The rear speakers are going to be in the back seat and also on the swim platform. So for this amplifier, I have a split RCA cable. One end of the cable goes into the stock radio, the other end splits into 2 channels. So I'll have one connector going to 2 connectors, which will connect to both right channels. And I have another connector going from 1 left channel to 2 left channels. So the second amplifier gets a little more complicated because we added a volume knob to control the volume separately for the Swimdeck speakers than the rest of the radio. What I did was I took a Y connector, connected it to each end of the rear channel outputs for the stock radio and split that. Taking a right and left channel from each of those, I took those and wired those straight to the amplifier. For the remaining 2 outputs, I had that go to a potentiometer-based volume knob. The outputs from the volume knob go straight to the other channels on the amplifier. This will give us the ability to quickly and easily change the volume of the Swimdeck speakers without affecting the rest of the system. Alright, so I took all the wires and straightened them all out and then pre-tucked them into the wire loom here. Then I took that and fed it down the side where the helm is, secured it, and connected all the RCA cables behind the radio. These are just the connections coming from that Y splitter. This red wire that I'm crimping here is actually the remote turn on for the amplifier. It will connect to the blue wire on the back of the radio and turn on the amplifier automatically when the radio turns on. I had to use a barrel connector here, which is just 2 male ends. It's going to go from the output of the Y splitter to the input of the volume knob. And finally, we're just going to heat shrink this tubing. Alright, these amps are temporarily mounted just so I can kind of get the spacing correct. Then I'm going to dress up and secure a lot of this stuff that's in here. Right now I'm going to take these wires and label the outer sheaths with a permanent Sharpie. Then I'm going to strip them down and prep them to install them into the amplifier. I'm cutting back about 4 to 5 inches of the outer sheathing here, and I'm going to pull it back and trim it off. Now I'm going to strip off about a ½ inch of the wire insulation. And so what I have here is vibration dampening rubber treadmill mat that I've cut in half. So this is really difficult to do, and I don't recommend you doing this by yourself. You're going to hold up the amplifier and press it up against the pads, and you're going to pre-drill the holes to make sure everything will line up. Then you're going to swing the amplifier out of the way and finish cleaning out the holes with the drill. You'll push the bolt through and hand screw the bolts in. Then you're going to go to the other side and put the locking nuts on from the engine compartment. I started hooking up some of the speaker wires, as you can see here, but more importantly you can see the pads that the amplifiers are mounted to. This is going to help reduce any vibration coming from the engines while it's mounted to the walls. Now we'll start connecting the RCA cables to the amplifiers. Remember, my left amplifier will control the rear speakers. The right amplifier will just get the split RCA cable, which will be the front and mid boat speakers. Is that a blue light? Here we now have our nicely labeled and properly loomed wire. Everything is beautifully tucked up and away. We have relocated this wiring harness to the back wall. These RCA cables are now secured to this wall. I put some loom around the flush-out hose and zip tied it to keep it away from the amplifiers. Time to install the volume knob. This looks like a good spot that will be out of the way but also easy to reach. Just checking for clearance above the radio here. I cut off the little mounting nibs to make a flush with the wall once I install it. I was able to remove the metal knob, and I'm going to trim it down so it sits almost flush with the fiberglass. I took a file to the bottom of the knob to smooth it out. Perfect. Very importantly, this drill bit is not going to go through the fiberglass. It's just trimming back the surface of about 1/8 of an inch to be able to securely fit the nuts from the knob. This is the view from the inside. It will sit just above the radio. Let's test out our newly trimmed knob. Perfect fit. Nice and flush with the fiberglass with a good range of rotation without any binding. We are almost done, guys. Now we just have to put the panels back on that we uncovered to have access to the area next to the helm. This notch was a little too small for the new amount of wires that we ran, so I marked it out and cut it out with a saw. Alright guys, that wraps up the speaker install. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment down below if there's something you want to see, and don't forget to subscribe so you can see when the next video is coming out. I'll catch you on the water.